Mercedes-Benz W163. This is a 2003 ML350, and we're going to remove the alternator. Check the pin comment for the timestamps. Diagnostics is next. The alternator removal starts at about the 120 mark. The voltage regulator removal starts at about the 1550 mark. The voltage regulator wire repair is shown at about the 2430 mark. This ML started to get an intermittent battery light, so we'll start her up and check the voltage on the battery with the vehicle running. We'll just go take voltage with the battery. We're looking for something over 14 volts. And you can see we're down to 13.8. This is my sister's ML. And when she told me about this, I checked it, and at that time, when the light was flashing on and off, it was only pulling in about 13.5. The light was off by the time I saw it, but the battery with the alternator running, with the engine running, the alternator charging was only about 13.5. So something's not right. We're gonna pull this alternator out. We need to disconnect the battery since we'll be working with the alternator. I'm going to disconnect it here at the negative terminal. This is the terminal, as you can see, that's closest to the firewall. It's got the black on it. This ought to be a 10 millimeter. This one is so worn out that it's worn down to like a 3/8. So I'll use my 3/8 to get it off, but yours ought to be a 10 millimeter. Once you have that loose, you might have to pry it a little to get it out. Pull it up and cover this terminal because you don't want this to be closing the circuit. Opening, closing, closing. If you don't have any cover like that, then take this and bring it over to here and zip tie it through that hole. Alright? You want to make sure that this is secure and that it's not going to be touching up against that battery at all. There we go. There's the alternator there. Luckily, it's not too difficult to get to on this ML. We will have to just slip the belt off and we'll remove this airbox. So let's do that first. Up here on the airbox is a clip, just like this. We're going to pop it open, and then there's one on the bottom side. It's just like it. You don't even need to see, you just kind of feel it. And now that will allow us to take that part off. To get this off completely, we have some more of those clips. We have 1, 2, 3, so we'll get these straight real quick. 1, 2, and 3. And then up on this side, we have another one here in the same position like this one. And that is, oh yeah, and one more back here, underneath here. Okay, there's that whole thing. Here's the ones that I didn't show, just this one here and there. So if you see there where they are. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's the air filter there. Right there you can see there's a coolant hose, and it's just in a couple of little plastic grooves here, so we just want to pull that out. There we go. Next we have the air filter here, so I'm just going to pop this out, and then there's just a few fasteners under here that will allow us to pull this box out of our way. Now to get this bottom part of the airbox out, you can see there's a connection here and there's a connection there. It's just fitting over those ducts, and right here, if you look down here, you can see, there we go. You can see that it's just in there. It's kind of in a little alignment boss. So we can just pop it out of there. So I'm just going to give it a little encouragement. And with my pry tool here, I guess I'll start. Oh, looks like there's one right here. So I guess I'll start right there. That one looks easiest to access. So I'm just getting in behind it with my pry tool. And just popped it out. There it goes. Okay. And then up here, what I'm doing up here, with this duct here, just gonna slip it off and pop it out here. There it goes. And now there's one more over right back here. I can't really get the camera in there, but it's just right back there. Pop it out. There it is. So there are the 3 places where you're popping it out. There, there, and there. And if you look on the bottom of it, you can see those features. It's just kind of pressed into place. You can see there, now we have much better access to that alternator. Looks like I'm going to have to remove this here. That's some type of external Torx there. So let's start with that. So this is an E8. I'll get in there. This E8. And that'll just pull that right out of our way. So let's take a look at the back of the alternator here. And you see we got one. Fastener there, that might be a 12 millimeter, and then we have an electrical connection there. While we're back here, I will go ahead and remove that one. I think that's a 12 millimeter, and that is not a 12, that is a 13 millimeter. Yeah, it is. Okay, so I'll just leave that on there. We'll pull this off when we pull the alternator out. Now we'll take the belts off, and you do not have to remove the fan clutch there to get the belt off. What we're going to be looking for is there's a 17 millimeter kind of feature down here under the on the underside of that tensioner pulley there. We just need to get on that with a tool, turn it counterclockwise, and that will move the tensioner pulley back, and then we can just slip the belt off the alternator. You're not going to be able to see this from any angle, but I'll put the camera down in here just so you can see the particular feature that I'm talking about. That is it right there. So you just want to be able to put a 17 millimeter on there. I'm not sure how much of this you're going to be able to see, but we'll give it a shot. I'm going to go in over here. And I am going to get on this, just go by feel. Okay. Just turning the ratchet so that I can fit it on there. I just got it on there. Now I'm going to turn it counterclockwise, and you'll see it will loosen up. It will loosen up that belt. And once it's loose enough, you can slip it off up here or at the alternator or at the water pump, wherever you can get it off easily. Let's see. There we go. Okay, so I got it off there on the idler, which means I can get it off down here at the alternator. Oops. And now I'm just going to slowly release the tensioner back. There is a little spot on that tensioner where you could put like a 5 millimeter Allen key in to hold it if you'd like. There's the alternator, so you can get in there, you can check the pulley. And it might be hard for you to hear, but this has got a little bit of a, there's a certain sound here, a little squeaky sound. You want to check it for play, so move it in and out, and it doesn't feel like it has any play in it. So let's take this thing out and have a closer look at it. At this point, it's just a few fasteners and the 2 electrical. There you can see those 2 fasteners. And those are both E14s. This coolant hose here is for the auxiliary, and it looks like it ought to just come off this clamp. This one's zip tied, so I'm going to cut that zip tie just to get it out of the way, so you'll be able to get on that fastener back there. You follow that hose back, it's this one right here to this device. This is the auxiliary coolant pump, and if you want to get a little more room, you can just pull up on this thing, and that rubber mount will kind of slide off of the steel thing there, just like that, and that'll give a little bit more room to work. So now we can move that hose to get on there. I think I'll be able to get in there with this setup here. Let's see. All right, I was able to get on it with that there. Let's see how tight this is. Not a ton of space, but okay, not too bad. We'll break this one free too before we get too carried away on that forward one. This one's much easier to reach. You can see I took the dipstick out and covered it with the bag. It was just kind of getting in my way. I was able to spin these out to here, and then you can turn them by hand, the one on the bottom. So I'll just try to remove these. You might have to kind of jiggle the alternator around a little bit to get them on their path. I'll put that one on the bottom too. You can see that one's to the point where it can be turned by hand, and these are pretty long. So I'm going to remove those. The alternator is still going to be in place because there's some bushings kind of holding it in place until we pry it out. I got the bottom one out. The top one's being a little bit more stubborn. I got that top bolt out as well now. Now we just got to kind of persuade it to come out of the bracket here. Might have to. This bushing here looks like it's gone in a little bit too much, so I might have to pry it there. Let's see what we can do. Do not pry off of this corner here for the valve cover. If you're going to be prying off of anything, make sure it's not the valve cover, or I wouldn't pry off the head either. So let's see. I'll go right here between the bracket and the alternator body itself and see if that'll move at all. Okay, it's moving there. Alright, so it looks like that bushing's not in too bad of shape. So I'll just keep going here. Maybe we'll get lucky and that'll do it for us. Go on this side a tad. Just be gentle. Don't break anything. If you get to a point where it's not prying well, then come back in with a tap and tap. So what I'm going to do now is give this housing on the alternator a tap. I'm going to go ahead and slip that electrical off right here, the one that we already did that 13mm on. The other electrical is still in place, but I can't reach that until we get this out. I'm going to give it another whack, I think. I think it's mostly just caught on the bottom bracket now. There, it's coming. There it is, almost. Oops, there it is. So let's see if I can wiggle it off of the bottom one. I had to move the camera because it was too much in my way, but what I did was I went right in here with the pry. I can get that to focus right here and pried it out. And just pressing against the alternator, bracing against that there, and it just did a little bit, did the other side, did a little bit, and now it's free. And after I pried it, I just kind of wiggled it out. It takes a little effort though. So now we can get this electrical. I'll turn this back here. This is the one here. Oh, look at that. The wire is messed up. This part here is the voltage regulator. So there's a, let me turn this around some. There's a clip here. So it looks like I gotta push that in and pull it up. Let's see if I can do that here. Ooh, that wire doesn't look so good. This feels very, very brittle. Okay, I got a pick. Maybe a pick will help if I get under here and lift that up, so maybe I will be less likely to break it. Okay. Oh boy, that thing's on there. Now I'm going in with the pliers. Always be very careful if you decide to use pliers on any kind of electrical connection because it's very easy to break them. Hopefully I don't break this one. Looks like it's coming a little bit. I've got the clip up. Alright, now I'm gonna try this pick again. You see I got a little gap there. There we go. Oh, there goes the pliers. Let's get this sucker off. Come on now. Okay, there we go. Now we can pull the alternator out. We'll just come up through this space that we made, just like this. There's a closer look at that wire there. You can see the insulation has been broken through, so I'm definitely going to have to repair that. Looks like whoever put this alternator in might have missed this bracket. That's the one that went around that hose there that was just kind of zip tied. It looks like that hole, it might go through here. I'm not sure, I'll have to look that up. But there's just a bunch of stuff zip tied to it. Here is the alternator. This is a remanufactured alternator. I got a little history on it. Apparently it was replaced within the last 4 years. I don't know if you'll be able to hear this, but listen. That doesn't sound so good. There isn't any play in the shaft here, but that sounds like dry bearings or some kind of bearing problem. But I'll show you here this voltage regulator, because if you have a good alternator and you can just replace your voltage regulator, that can save you a lot of money. The voltage regulator is behind this plastic here. You can see this is broken on this one. Don't know what that's all about. These are 13 millimeters, so we'll go ahead and remove those. Let's see if this will be long enough. I might need a deep socket on there. That'll be all right. Probably shouldn't be too tight, and they're not. That one's pretty tight. There we go. We'll remove these. With those two nuts off, right here we have a Phillips, or probably a JIS, and that was pretty loose there. Let's pull this out and see. And then this plastic piece will lift up. I'm just going to bring that screw up with it. You can see there's a locking washer and a regular washer there. Then this part here is the voltage regulator. So we have, looks like 1, 2, 3 more Phillips. So we'll get these 3 Phillips out, and we're going to want to remove them all the way. There is a locking washer and a regular washer on each one, so don't lose that. This one is shorter. Let me pull this out. There we go. So you want to make sure you have both of those washers on there. This one's shorter. These two are longer. Pull these out. The screws aren't very tight. You're going to want to remember that when you reinstall it. It doesn't need to be real tight when you reinstall it. This one, you can see as well, has that same deal with the locking washer on top, and then the other washer below. Get the camera back there. And get this one. I'm gonna have to grab the magnets. I don't want to drop that. There we go. And if yours fall off, you're going to put it back together with the locking washer first, and then the regular washer. So now to pull this out, we're going to pull it this way, because this is where the brushes are touching. So we'll just pull it out like that. There we go. And there are the brushes. We'll have a closer look at this now. This is the voltage regulator, and these are brushes just like you'd see on many types of motors, and you can see these still have quite a lot of material on them. These are spring loaded so that they can, as the material is used up, they can continue to push back against the shaft. When these get real worn down, they'll lose contact with the shaft. I'll show you what I mean here. That's the shaft I'm talking about. That goes all the way through. And so that's what those brushes have to touch. There is so much material on these brushes that it makes me think probably is something else in the alternator. Might have to do a little more investigating into this remanufactured alternator. But if you have your original Bosch or Valeo alternator, a lot of times you can just replace this part, and it's only like $35. And you put that in with a new one of these and you're good to go for a long time. As a matter of fact, some people even do it as preventative maintenance. Taking a closer look at these brushes here, and you see how that shape is not even, it's slanted. That's a clue about eccentric wear, or eccentric motion I should say, on the shaft from the bearings going out. So that makes sense, seeing as the bearings don't sound so good on this alternator. That wouldn't necessarily cause a charging problem, because it doesn't look like it's too severe. Since there is still brush material here, what I'm going to do is get all these contacts cleaned up. I'm going to put this back together, have it bench tested at the auto parts store, and then proceed from there. I'm going to repair that electrical connection, because I'm thinking that it might have actually been that electrical connection, since it was an intermittent light and there still is material. This will have to be addressed though in the future. This alternator is going to have to be replaced because of the way that the bearings are looking like they're on their way out. But we might get a few more months out of it. I'm going to get all these connections cleaned up on this and on the back plate. I'm also going to clean up any rusty spots like that there on the washers. Just get everything cleaned up. This little tool from Harbor Freight with that attachment on it, this was like $6. This is working great to get in here. It fits right in there. There was some rust there. You can see it's working to clean it out. I'll show you. I'm just cleaning all of these, and then on the back side as well. I got the contacts cleaned up on the voltage regulator and cleaned up the fasteners. We'll go ahead and put this together. This is just going to slide back in like there and there, just as when we pulled it out. And then we're going to go back in with those screws, the short one. And remember, they have the washer, then the locking washer. Well, when you're putting it on, you put the locking washer on first, then the regular washer. Put the little short one there. And none of these are very tight. I'll put up a torque spec for you, but I doubt most people even have a torque wrench that goes as low as this would be. I'm just going to get this started a little bit and then put the other ones in. The other ones are these skinny ones, not the longer ones that are a little wider. That's for the outside case. Put this in here and that in there. We'll just get these tightened down. Again, you don't want to go crazy tight on it. If you're curious, I've got a torque wrench here set to 20 inch-pounds, and I'll just show you how little that is. See that? Not much at all. So with those 3 Phillips in, we'll put this cover back on, and that's just gonna go like this. Then up here we have that. The only other Phillips left remaining. It's a long one, and it's kind of thick. Same torque spec on this as the little ones. It's just 20 inch-pounds. Little bit different though for these. For this one with the long stud, so both these nuts are the same. This one with the long stud is where we took the connections off on the vehicle. That's why the stud is so long, to allow room for the connections on the vehicle. This long stud is 22 foot-pounds, so fairly tight, and this short stud is 9 foot-pounds. So 9 foot-pounds or 108 inch-pounds on the short one, and 22 foot-pounds on the long one. With these 2 nuts torqued down, this is ready to go in. What I'm going to do is take it to go get tested, like I mentioned, and see if we can't get a little bit more life out of this. I'm definitely going to have to fix that electrical connection though. I took the alternator in and I got it tested, and it tested good. So it is putting out, it's capable anyway of putting out 14.2 volts, which would be where we need it to be. So because that's with that same old voltage regulator in there, and with even these noisy bearings, now I'm concerned, and I'm thinking that it is that electrical connection. So that's going to get repaired next, and then we're going to put this back in and see if we get a different result. It's pretty windy. Hopefully you'll be able to hear, but I'm going to try to take this connector off, since that part there is so close that I don't think I'm going to be able to repair with just electrical tape. So I'm going to try to use heat shrink and get a better repair. You can see there's a part number there. It's just too windy out there, so I'll show you this on the bench. This is the same connector. You can see the part number there. This has 2 wires because I think this was a crankshaft position sensor application of the same connector. but it's the same connector. So what you want to do is this side here with the part number on it, you got to be real careful because it's easy to break these, but even if you break it, you could still use it if you don't break it too bad. Putting the screwdriver in, and I'm just going to kind of pivot this little panel up. See how that just moved? Then you want to just keep a screwdriver or something under here to kind of keep that angled up, just so those little latches on the top don't come back down. And we're going to go into the bottom here, and there's just kind of like a little part where it kind of latches. You'll know you have it if you can press the connector and it moves. Oops. Okay, so I just got it. That fell out, but you see here, it's going to move out the back. I can drop that down, and I'll just keep pushing this. And there comes the wire. Okay. There it is there. I'll try to show that again here on this other one. And this is the one that you would be working on because that's the one, it's lined up with that if you're doing the alternator one, since you wouldn't have one in there. So it would kind of look like this. With this thing up, I'm just going to make sure that that's up and it's not going to in any way lock there. There's a little tab. I'll show you in a second here when we get this out. I'm just going to kind of go on the top and make sure that it's free. It feels like it is. Check on the bottom. Feels like it is. Let me see if I can push it out now. If not, I'll move back to the top. Let's see. There it goes. Okay. I can get that out now, and I can just push this. Push that out. Alright, so I'll show you here what I mean. If we look in there, well, that's pretty good lighting there. Let's see if I can zoom in that. Alright, we can see there's kind of like a little stopper on each side on the bottom and on the top, and you'll feel that when you put the screwdriver in. If you just kind of ride it along the bottom, see how it stops, and then you move up and you move over it. So stopper, move up, over, stopper, move over, same deal here, and right there, where that one, right there. And those are catching on these little features on the wire itself. Very hard to see, but right here you can see this is symmetrical, and there's a catch here and a catch there. So what you're doing to get it out, that first step is kind of unlocking this hinged panel up here. But when we go to install this back together, what we'll do after we get the wire repaired and everything, we'll press this back down so it's in the snap down position. Let me make sure it's snapped down. Okay, now when we push the wire through, it's going to want to catch on those. So with that hinge part pushed down, we're going to push the wire back in, and I'm going to put this where I took it out, which was this number 1 spot here, and it's going to, the wire, the part, that little feature on the wire there, you see how it's going to line up right there and snap. So we're going to be hoping for a snap. Let's see. It didn't really snap on this one, but it did click in. You can see I'm pulling it. You can see there. So let's try the other one. Oh, that wasn't all the way down. Okay, make sure you've got yours all the way down. That's why it didn't snap. And now we'll do this one. Try to get this in. Okay, it's not all the way in yet. You can see it's not all the way in yet. There it goes. It just made a faint snapping noise. And that's in there. See that? That's in there. So just if you have to do this, double check on the ends here that you didn't bend them up too much. It's all metal, so if you bent them up like that one, it bent up a little. Just gonna fix it just a little like that, and you'll just make sure that whatever connector it's going on, that it'll get a good connection. And that's it. That's that repair on that. And of course, your other option is to get a harness like this from the junkyard or on eBay or salvage place, whatever, and just have them send it to you with the wires, and just cut the wire, patch in, and then if you're doing the alternator with just the one wire, then just deadhead the other wire. This is the heat shrink that I'm using. This is both of these from Harbor Freight. marine heat shrink, which is nice because if you look on the inside, I don't know if you can tell with that, but it's got, yeah, you can see that shininess. It's got like some type of waterproofing agent in there. So when you melt this, I'll show you in a second, a little bit will come out on each end and it seals it for water. So that's great for this application. The other thing I like about this stuff is it kind of, it's thick and it kind of seals kind of hard. I'll show you on this. I used it on this iPhone charger cord, and I put another piece under there because this was pretty worn through, but you can see it's actually kind of stiff. And I repaired it here too. This stuff is really great, and you can see how much it shrinks because there's a big size difference between that end and that end, but that's the same piece, same diameter. So supposedly it shrinks to about 1/3 of its original size, and I'll pick the size that will just barely fit over, so it's as tight as I can get it. But I'll show you how this stuff works. It's pretty cool. Probably should have showed this before I put this thing back together, but you remember how those look. You're just going to get whatever size will just fit over it because you want the heat shrink to be as small as you can. So we'll just put it on this end. I think this one actually had a little tear. So let's say you've got a little tear like that. That's what you're trying to repair. You slip this marine heat shrink on. Get the wire kind of straightened out because, like I said, this stuff it gets a little bit rigid. If there's any crazy insulation that's poking out, clean it up. So go on, for example, with a piece like that, use a torch, heat gun, even a pocket lighter will work, but the torch is kind of nice. And you're just using the heat, not the flame, you're just using the heat from the torch to melt that. And you can see how much it shrinks. Make sure you get the ends real well. See how that end cleaned up real nice. Just go all around. See you've got it all shrunk. Looks like I might need a little more right there. Okay, and then as this stuff, you'll see, there you can see there's kind of like a little clear material that came out of there. That's that waterproofing stuff, and it'll harden up pretty quickly as it cools, and this will be waterproof on both ends. So that's kind of nice. It's not absolutely necessary, but the other thing I like about it is because it's so thick, for a spot like that on the alternator where it's obviously rubbing against something, that's a nice protection. So what I'll do is I'll put one on like that, and then I'll put another piece of heat shrink. And this is also from Harbor Freight. There's a bunch of different sizes in here. The only downside with this is they're all real short, but I'll show you something else you can get from Harbor Freight where they have a bunch of longer lengths. What's going to be the smallest one here? 5/32, so we'll use this for an example. And I'll just slip another one over there, whatever one I can get on there. Okay, same deal. You're just using the heat from the torch, not the flame. And that's going to shrink around there, just give it extra level. But since this isn't waterproof on the ends, you can see how that's a little wide there. But that's okay since we have the other one in there. And let's say the repair looks something like that. And don't hold the flame too close, because if you do, you see what happens. That's bad. Don't do that. You're just using the heat. To repair this, I'm going to go in with a few pieces of heat shrink. So I'm going to cut this back so I can actually go back a little further on this, and then I'll come back with a piece to repair that. I'm going to use a marine heat shrink. So I'm going to try a piece about this long here, and this will just slip right over, and I'm just going to push it past this, and this here, this is the waterproofing thing into the connector, so we don't want to go over that. And if you remember, we don't have a ton of clearance between here and where the connector is. So I'm going to grab the connector, just get an eyeball. We'll probably end up going somewhere about right there. So comparing it with the connector here, we know this is supposed to go right to the end there. You can see not a whole lot of space back here. I think I do need to cut a little of this old insulation off because it's kind of starting to hail. That's what's falling into the engine bay, if you see that. I'm just going to cut this so it's not going to poke through the new insulation. Now with that insulation gone, you can see that is almost all the way worn through. So I wonder if this wasn't our problem here. I'm probably going to end up having to replace this wire, but seeing as I can test it, it's not a big deal to take the alternator in and out of this vehicle. I think I'll go ahead and try this repair, and then if I have to come back later with a new wire, I'll do that. So I've got that about as cleaned up as I can get, and with this heat shrink, I'm just going to bring it just a little bit past. Let's get this water out of there. And then I'm going to heat it up with that torch. Make sure you don't catch anything else on fire, including your glove. Looks like camera battery went out. It's kind of hard to work around the camera in here anyway. But that's what I did there. I'm going to go over this with another piece of heat shrink, just regular heat shrink, so that this seals up real nicely. I was able to get this on here, this other piece. And so now I'm just going to slip a slightly wider piece of heat shrink around this whole thing, the part that I cut, just to seal that off. And then hopefully that'll do it. So I have this piece here. Just slip this over. This doesn't have to shrink a whole lot, just enough to seal up against there. There's the connector there, and you can see there's only one opening in the back to put it through, so you can't get it mixed up. And if you look in there, you can sort of see right there. That's the part that we were pressing down. Kind of pressing down right here, right there, to get the pin out. And it looks like this is symmetrical. It looks like it's the same on the top and the bottom, so it doesn't matter which way we put this in. See, it's got the little lock on both on that side, and it's got one on that side. So I'll just push this back in. Hopefully it'll snap. Let's see what we get. Snap. Okay. Make sure that's in there. Oh, sorry. I'm just gonna press this with the little screwdriver to make sure it doesn't slide back. It's not sliding back, so that's in there. That's locked. So that's good. There's the repair there. And it looks like I got the heat shrink in just about the right space, so there isn't any bare wires showing through there. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and put the alternator back in and see if we get any different results. So I'll just tuck this to the side. Now, if your bushing is anything like this one, where it kind of really came in and it was giving a lot of trouble to remove it, it's going to give a lot of trouble to reinstall it. So what I just did was I just sprayed some PB Blaster around the outside of the bushing, so it would be like this part, but on this side here, and then I just took the punch, and it was sticking out quite a bit more. I put the punch on it and then smacked the other end of the punch with a hammer a couple times, and you can see it moved back. So this bushing will be pulled into where it needs to be when we put that fastener on and torque it down. This will just make it a lot easier to install it on the top here. And you can do the same thing on this bottom one if you need to. It's just a little bit more difficult to reach. I had to put some new heat shrink on this here, and I'm going to run that down there through that path. And I'm not sure if that's the right path, but we'll see if it fits. This bracket, since it was off, I'm also not sure how it goes, but I think the bolt for the alternator on the bottom goes through that, and that it goes in a position kind of like this. That's what I'm thinking. And the hose goes through the plastic part there. So we'll put this on after we get the alternator in place. We'll get the alternator in now, and if you remember, we had to disconnect that one electrical before or after we had it out for the bracket, so I'll go ahead and reconnect that electrical before we put it into the bracket. And I'm going to get this snapped in, this electrical, before I put it in the bracket, since when we took it out, that's how we did it. This has to be snapped in real well. Snap. Okay, give it a good tug. Make sure that it's past that. The clasp is past that there. Alright, now, those other ones, the other connection, the ones that goes on that stud, we can do that after. So now, turn this thing. It's gotta go around like this. And get it back into the bracket. Let's see. almost into the bottom one, and now it's into the bottom one. I'm going to go ahead and put that fastener in the bottom one. I think I'm going to try to get this top bolt in place first, and maybe that'll help me get that bottom one in. So let's get this on since I can at least see this one. I got that top one in. I'm going to go in with the bottom one, and I have it on the bracket like that. Like I said, I'm not positive that this is how this bracket goes, but it looks like it sort of makes sense. So, let's see. And I did stick a screwdriver in the hole here on the bottom one to make sure that it was aligned, and it's aligned. It's just kind of tedious with these long bolts, getting it so that it will go in. I'm going to have to move the camera, it's too much in my way. That was a real test of patience there. I probably should have put this top one in, I probably should have put that bottom one in first, and then done the top one, because it was very difficult to get that, that fastener placed. It does look like that is how the bracket goes. I haven't got it closed on that hose yet, because I haven't got those torqued down yet. But I just wanted to say what I did is I went in with first the screwdriver to get it aligned, and then I tried to get the fastener in, and that was not happening. So I went in with something thicker. I used this here. That's a, what size is that? That is, I'm not sure what size that is, but it's very close to the size of the fastener. And so I put that in the hole and moved it around until I could move this in and out cleanly. Then got the fastener in, and then it was still not a lot of fun catching the threads on the other side. Just took quite a lot of patience. That took quite a while to get that bolt in. It looks like this is there's a feature on the bottom there that is causing it to stop right there. So as this bolt is tightened, it's turning the bracket and it's stopping there. So it looks like that is the proper placement for it. I'm going to torque these down now. Torque on these bolts is 31 foot-pounds. There it is. Then on the back of the alternator we had these two connections. This one here was the one that, if you follow it back, it goes directly to the positive side of the battery. And that one on there, on that stud, and then this one here, that's the one with this shape. That one goes over it, or either way, I think it fits probably best this way. And then we have this nut. Now that nut is a 13mm on this one. I don't know, since this is a replacement alternator, I don't know if it came with that nut or if that's what the factory spec is too. Torque is 160 inch-pounds. There it is. I'm going to try to clip this hose clamp thing now. It should just go together, but since it apparently hasn't been connected in years on this vehicle, it might not go together. I might have to get some zip ties. Let's see. It's looking like that should go way over there and that should go there. I was able to get this clamp on. It was a little awkward though. What I had to do with these long pliers is go here and squeeze it with that part there on the right, and then I squeezed it together and it snapped. It does seem to be on there pretty well too. If you can't get yours on, just go in with zip ties or something to make sure that you're not going to allow that hose to end up wrapped up in this fan. We can get this belt back in place now. So what I'm going to do, the path on this is, it is going to be something like this. It's coming over this idler around the alternator, and then the back of it is touching the water pump. So what I'm going to do is, as before, I'll get it around the alternator first, and when I get a little bit more slack after I move the tensioner, and then I'll slip it over the alternator. So I'll see if I have enough slack. I do right now to just place it on the alternator pulley. So that is on the alternator pulley down there. Okay, and it's slipped on to the back of the water pump right here. So all I gotta do is get enough slack to slip it over this. Go back and grab this. I'm going to be turning counterclockwise again. Over here you can see I'm just on that same 17mm feature there on the bottom side of the tensioner, and I'm just going to move it counterclockwise that way to get enough slack to slip it over that idler pulley. I changed tools to get a little better leverage there, so I'm going to turn this counterclockwise, and once I have that back, I should have enough slack to get over this idler pulley. There we go. There it is. Okay, now just double checking over there. I'm still around the alternator, and I'm over the top of the water pump, and then back over here, over the top of the idler. And I'm just going to make sure that it's not coming off the tensioner any. Right there. Now I'm going to release it, and we'll double check the belt path for all of the pulleys. Let's slowly release it. There it is. Have a peek over here at the power steering pump pulley to make sure that you didn't come off of that. I'll put up a belt routing guide, but you just want to make sure that you're going, it's kind of hard to get around all these items. You're still going around the power steering pump, like you see there, and then on the outside of the AC compressor there, around the crankshaft, which I'm going to have to come over here to see. There's the crankshaft. Around the crankshaft, back, and then the back side you can see is touching around the tensioner pulley. And then the back side over the water pump. The inside around the alternator, back up over the top. The inside around the idler pulley, and then that's back to where we started. So this looks good. Also, just make sure for places like the water pump there and the idler or the tensioner pulley there, where it's running on the back side, make sure that it's not all the way this way or all the way to the back. Make sure it's kind of centered on the back on the pulley. Since there aren't grooves, there isn't anything to keep it aligned, but once it's tensioned, it'll keep aligned. Be sure to have a look down here to make sure that the belt is not touching that hose wherever you ended up putting it. There's plenty of clearance right here in that position, so it does look like that's kind of how that clamp is supposed to be if you still have your bracket in that clamp. If you remove this little shield there with that E8 fastener that just goes there, kind of like it doesn't seem to be having an exact place, but that's how it was, so that's how I put it back. Now we can put the airbox back in. I just like to put a little rubber grease in these grommets here. It makes it easier to remove and install them in the future. And then this thing you can see is kind of falling apart here. The airbox goes in with that feature, obviously going to there, and then the duct up here, which is right down here. Yours might have fallen down like mine did. I ended up taking this thing and just sticking it on here instead of having it there. And we'll just get this lined up now. We've got those 3 alignment bosses, and then that duct's got to make it back through that hole. Okay, it's back through the hole, and there it goes. It just kind of snaps in. Now that we got those 2 ducts in, make sure that those are good and sealed. We can stick this air filter back in. And then we'll put in the top of the airbox. Make sure that this air filter is all the way flush around the edge. Otherwise it will kind of fight you when you put the airbox back on. Then down here on the bottom side of the airbox there, make sure you get this coolant hose back where it goes in there like that until those little grooves. I think I need 2 hands. There you go. You just want to push the hose in there like that. Then if you come over here on that same hose there, there's like a little plastic deal. And you just want to have one plastic deal holding this harness. This is the harness that goes to the positive side of the battery, and then the other clip is on that hose. So you'll remember with this airbox we just had those 5 or 6 clips around it. These here. And we're just going to line up with those and then line this up with that duct that has the MAF sensor on it. So I'll get that lined up there first, but not do any of the clamps. And then just kind of get it in place. And it feels good, so I'll get a couple of the clamps and I'll show you a little detail on the clamps. When you're working on the clamps here, this part doesn't go way up here. It just barely catches. So if you're over this, see how there's kind of a little bit depth? It will not close when it's like that. It's got to be right there. Okay, that's where it should be to close. Because it won't close if it is all the way in. I'll show you again on this one here. You don't want it all the way in here. You just want it not like that. It won't close. You just want it right there, and then it will close. So make sure that you have all of those, and there was 6 of those. Then up here on the duct, there's one on the top and then one on the bottom, and that's going to go around this thing, this square part there. It goes around that, and then you close it, and the bottom one you can't see it, so you'll have to go by feel, but it's the same thing. Make sure it goes around it. All right. So for the airbox, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, 6. And for the duct, 1 on the top and 1 on the bottom. If you remove the dipstick, time to put that back in. If you remove this auxiliary hose to give a little more wiggle room, you're just going to line those grooves up with that metal piece and just push it down. Okay, there it is. And up here at the battery, we can get this battery reconnected, which will be a 10mm if you have a new connection, or for my case, this is worn down to a 3/8. Let's get that one there real tight. Make sure you've got a pretty snug connection there. And that'll do it. So I'll go ahead and start her up, see if we get any low voltage light or anything, and then we will check voltage at the battery. Okay, it doesn't look like we have a light, so let's go check voltage at the battery. Let's see what we get here. Wow, look at that. We are back up over 14 volts. So this is good. So this looks good. That's a SRS light there, which is a different issue on this vehicle. We don't have a low voltage light or a battery light. So I'm going to go ahead and shut her off. I'm going to call this a fix. I think the cause of the problem was in fact that electrical connector. So if you're having some issues and you can't pin it down to the alternator or the battery, then the first move up that circuit would be that connector, and you may have a break in it like we did. So as I mentioned in the video, I do think the alternator will need to get replaced. Those bearings don't sound great, but seeing as it's still putting out plenty of charge, maybe one will pop up at the junkyard where they're $25 instead of $200, and I can replace that Chinese reman with an OEM Bosch, swap out a new voltage regulator, and probably be good for a very long time. I hope this video was helpful for you. Thank you for watching, and good luck with your repair.